Empower Asia actually commenced back in 1990 from Tokoroa in the Waikato in New Zealand. And Carly and I had been working with street kids in Tokoroa, and we just kind of felt like our time was sort of coming to an end there. And just over a period of a year or two, we made this switch from New Zealand to Thailand. When we arrived in Bangkok, we didn't really know anybody except one New Zealand family who we stayed with briefly. We didn't have visas, and we weren't part of an organisation, so we set up our own organisation. After a month or so, we relocated and rented a small house adjacent to Klang Doi slum in Bangkok, which is one of the biggest slums in the world. And we got to know boys adjacent to that slum who were begging. They weren't at school, and unbeknownst to us, initially they were child prostitutes. And these were guys aged about 10, 11, 12 years of age. They were pretty rough. So just over that time we got to know them, and then we invited them to stay with us. So when we first met the boys, they used to hang around in a flat land, grassy area. And I remember the day that I invited them to come and stay with us. They were sitting on a barrel and messing around on this barrel out in this grass area. Just behind them was a whole lot of high-rise government apartments for people who'd moved from the country into the city to find work. And these really were high-rise slums. They were extremely unattractive, very smelly and dirty and horrible. Our boys actually lived in low-rise slums on the ground, just one story high. Now that grass area has been taken over with further development and more buildings and fitting in more people. And that's socio-economic progress, I guess. But in a sense, if they're not careful, they'll just become high-rise slums as well. So very early on in our contact with the boys, we got to know this man. He was a single man, and he had this really small apartment close by to Patpong, the red light area. And the boys would go to his apartment and wash there. And you can imagine all the stuff that was happening there besides them just taking a bath. And of course, this guy was 60-year-old pedophile from Britain, I think. And there was just a whole raft of these sort of people who were in the lives of the kids. So obviously it was important for them to come and stay in a family with Carly and I. And it didn't take long for them to realise that, we didn't have all these bad motives for looking after them. So we all stayed in the house together, which was, it was chaotic. And our ability to speak Thai was very low. So we really threw ourselves in at the deep end fast. And I think it was good, but it was very stressful. There were times where we would see an aeroplane flying overhead, heading back towards Australia or New Zealand, and sometimes you'd wish, oh man, I'd do anything to be on that plane and heading back home, back to what we were used to. But we knew that we were called to relocate into Asia and to commit there for a good period of time until God called us away. Not until we decided we'd leave, but until God called us away. So that these boys were working in an infamous red light area called Patpong, which is well known to sex tourists right around the world. They weren't working in a bar or stripping or any of that kind of thing, but they would hang around on the street unaccompanied, and by and large it would be Western men aged probably 30 to 65 who would pick them up, and they would go with these clients, and each boy had to pay 500 baht, which is about 20 New Zealand dollars, to their gang that in theory looked after them. And any money they made more than that they could keep. If they didn't produce that money for the gang each day, then in theory they were going to get the bash from the gang. When the boys came to stay with us, they were pretty rough, and our house was quite small, and it was a pretty rough house itself. And so they'd never really had proper baths before, and used a proper toilet before. Because you've got to remember, Thailand back then, back in 1990, is not like the Thailand of today. It was quite different. We had other kids who we brought in subsequent, following those boys, who routinely ate dirt. So that Thailand back then is quite different. And so these boys, they loved staying with the white people, of course, and they filled up our the sewerage or septic tank, and then it started flowing all over the tiny little front lawn and completely stunk the house out. And it was a few days later that Carly was about to take a shower, and she grabbed a towel out of the towel rack, and she found a little present that had been left in there by one of the boys. He'd done his thing in the towel and then wrapped the towel back up again and put it back in the towel rack, because they completely blocked the toilet, and when you got to go, you got to go, so they did it in a towel. We can remember one night, because we always used to have ice cream with the boys, and they loved all that, so they'd have their main course then ice cream. And one night we said to them, oh, sorry boys, no ice cream tonight. We've run out, or we haven't got any, or some such thing. They all just ran out. They all jumped out the windows, because they didn't often use the door. They'd just jump out the windows. And they jumped out the windows and ran away. And we thought, oh, little ingrates. God, we do all that work for them, and we help them, and they just run off. And they came back about an hour later, laden with coins. We said to them, oh, where'd you get the coins from? And of course, they'd gone down to a really big intersection, and they'd just go up to car windows and knock on the window and go, oh, can we have a bit of money? And so that's how, and they used to have, Americans call them fanny packs or belt bags. They used to have heaps of belt bags. And they're belt bags that they'd stolen off people in buses, and, they'd have a little knife and cut the belt bag while the person's standing up on the bus and steal their stuff. So they were kind of pretty feral. We didn't have too many problems with them, except it was hard to develop them because they were at the bottom of the cliff in terms of they were already child prostitutes and already quite traumatized by that, and were already kind of living a life of crime. It was hard to develop or disciple them. So we made a decision that we would leave Bangkok and go up to the northeast of Thailand, where a lot of these boys originally hailed from. And so we decided to do work that was a lot more preventative in nature, rather than, the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. And that was kind of how the evolution of our modus operandi and our aims and how we would go about developing leadership. That's how it all came. In a sense, it actually came from failure, because we tried to get something right and it would fail, and we tried again and it would fail, and until we came up with a sort of a formula or a template that worked. And even today, 2018. We still basically use the same template when we spread work from country to country, from that we gleaned from back in about 1993. And that's worked fine for us even up to this time.